this afternoon's Secrets Revealed talk. So basically, it is all going to be about old photos. Originally I tried to do it a thematic style, but it just got too complicated. So basically, it is just going to be an A to Z one. So if you go onto our online catalogue and put the word photograph in, or photographs, you get a results of 94,300, give or take. And these vary from glass lantern slides to 35mm slides and photographic prints. Now, obviously, there's no way we could look at all of these. So this presentation is a bit of an eclectic smorgasbord of images taken from our collections. Hopefully, there'll be a few, more than a few, that you've not seen before, although we will be throwing in a few of our favourites. Well, I say our favourites, my favourites, because, well, basically, why not? So we'll dive straight into it. Looking at glass plates, so these came in before film and for paper as a way of capture medium for photography. So we basically had a light sensitive emulsion of silver salts coated on a glass plate, and these glass plates are typically quite thin, no more than sort of an eighth of an inch, sort of like 2 or 3 millimeter basically. There are several different types and lots of different processes, but essentially they all created a black and white negative, and this is one of St Martin's in Gloucester. I've yet to figure out what that is, to be honest. Excuse me. They were heavily used from the mid-1850s onwards, but with the spread of film, basically from 1890, 99 onwards, they began to decline. However, oddly, they are still used in quite a few processes today, and notably astrophotography. They still use them. They love using them. So they're quite important, and I've seen a few astrophotographer ones, and it's basically because somehow it's easier to look at white stars on a black background than it is to look at the other way around. Sorry, it's easier to look at dark stars on a white background. It's much easier. Really strange. So we hold over 2,000 glass plate negatives dating from the 1860s to the 1930s. I did try and find our earliest one, but not arranged that way, so I couldn't really find it, sadly. So looking at slides, 35mm transparencies, given their full name. These are basically have a layer of light sensitive dyes on a transparent base, and they're held inside a plastic or card mount when they've been developed. In contrast to negative based film, slides produce a positive image, and they're really renowned for their high color saturation, and some photographers still use them today. They still prefer them. You can still get them processed and everything, although obviously your digital cameras are catching up fast. The name slide, which I didn't realise, comes from the fact that without the mount around them, the transparent film wouldn't be able to slide from one image to another inside a carousel or a magazine or a projector. So that's why they're called slides. And I'd never known that. I just called them slides, basically. Moving on to photographic prints. So this is where you produce an image on paper using a light sensitive gelatine emulsion, basically. They are, or prior to digital, were the most popular form of photographic medium. Interestingly, old photos, you might notice, they tend to curl up as they age, and this is because the gelatine emulsion as it begins to age, it dries out and shrinks, and depending on the color of it, it shrinks at different rates, and it will actually bend the paper. And interesting, if you even get these bent photos and put them in a book and try and flatten them, the curl will always pop back, but you can remove it by exposing the print to a very little amount of moisture, and that basically reabsorbs into the gelatine and it will flatten the print. And all the photos in this presentation are from paper prints, unless I've stated. I think there's one or two I did from slides, but glass plates are difficult. So getting into the actual subject, so this is a bunch of apprentices from the Doughty Archive. They're obviously on a fancy dress raising money for Regent's House Fund. We think it's a retirement home. I did try and find some information about it, but I couldn't find anything. But 25 miles, they're not running. It's not a marathon, but it's a walk in a marathon. And I'm not quite sure where they went from. The houses in the background have a hint of outside Doughty's, the old Doughty Hall at the moment, but I'm not sure. So Gloucestershire's a famous aviation county. One very special event occurred on Saturday, the 6th of August 1932, when the Imperial Air Rays Handley Page HP-45 flew in, GAAXC, Hercules or Hercules, flew into Brockworth, bringing critics for a George Bernard shore play at Malvern, and Gloucester was deemed the closest place to land, so they were driven up by taxi. And while the aircraft hung around at Brockworth, it actually started taking flying trips. So it took councillors of Gloucester and Cheltenham on joyrides, basically trying to persuade them it'd be a good idea to build an airport, which, as we all know today, is our beloved Staverton Airport, which is currently under threat of being sold off. But after it took the officials for a joyride, it took sightseeing trips for locals, and you could buy the tickets from the Gloucester branch of the WH Smith, and they'd cost you 10 shillings and sixpence, about 24 quid today. And they did about 10 or 12 trips, apparently, carrying about sort of 20 to 30 people. Must have been an incredible sight. If you look on the British Aviation, in British Pathé archive, there are some films of these aircraft, and they are wonderful machines. As well as, obviously, I said we're connected with aircraft in Gloucestershire. H.H. Martin in Cheltenham, woodworking firm, renowned for their work on ocean liners, notably Lusitania. When World War One began, the company found its skilled woodworkers were ideal for making war airplanes. So this is a couple of views from the plane shop, when you see various aircraft fuselages and wings being made and assembled. By the end of the war, the company completed around £1.5 million of government contracts. They'd employed over 780 people, and a lot of these were women, especially in the what they called the doping fabric section. Also, of course, the company had founded by this time Gloucestershire Aircraft Company, which went on from strength to strength. And if you have a very careful, I try to identify some of the airframes here, but I'm not that skilled. But the top photo in the sort of left-hand side, in the middle distance, there is a Bristol F2 fighter being assembled. Look at some bees. So I just found this one. This is the chap who's a beekeeper somewhere in Bishop's Cleeve. If you keep bees, you'll notice it's a really old-fashioned designer smoker he's got there. I'm not quite sure what he's doing. There's a bee frame in front of him, and it looks like he's emptying, but it looks like he's emptying something into a compost. So I'm not quite sure what he's doing, but he's definitely got a hood on and everything. So it's a rather nice photo. We all heard of bee swarms, and that swarm is the natural process of a bee colony reproducing. It's when the old queen decides there's too many bees in here, so she leaves the old hive with some worker bees, and they sort of hang around somewhere and wait until scout bees decide on a new home. And this bee swarm has decided to rest on the front wing of an Austin A30. Comes from the police archive there, and the policeman is just there, obviously keeping things in order. But to be honest, bees in the swarm, they're very tame. They don't hurt you. They're just interested in finding a new home. And we usually, I noticed this chap here appears to be collecting the bees in a box. Usually, beekeepers would collect them in a straw skep, and this is one photograph we've got of one. They've been in use since the medieval period, unchanged. And again, some beekeepers still use them today. Blacksmithing. So most villages and hamlets had their own smithy, often more than one, depending on the community's size. This is a lovely photograph. This is the blacksmith Bill Cleaton working at his forge in Clifford's, Maine in circa 1910. He would usually they just had one sort of barn with a forge in, and they would do most of their work outside. But interestingly, when villages expanded, as is the case here, the smithy was often engulfed with housing, and this is the photograph here of the blacksmith at Cam, Absalom Ford. What a wonderful name. And his forge is on Chapel Street in Cam. You can see from the map there the smithy. It's the longish building, and you can see it here. And these buildings often got swamped, and they sort of carried on. There's another couple in Cam I noticed as well. So AA Association formed 20th June 1905, initially to help motorists avoid police speed traps, not to help you get going again. But this is a lovely view of the Citizen newspaper captured a view of two of the last AA motorcycle patrols in 1967, before they were replaced with AA branded vehicles, which we all know today, in 1968. And by this time, they were becoming much more associated with helping breakdowns rather than helping you avoid police speed traps. But it's a great photo. Some buses, so buses, omnibuses have been around for a long time. This is a horse bus in Lansdowne Road in Stroud. It's not the best photo, but it's quite nice. You can see, quite awkward to get in and out of the damn things. This one I came across quite recently. It's a really interesting photograph. It's a Clarkson steam bus, no connection to Jeremy Clarkson, obviously, and it's of the Cirencester and District Motor Omnibus Company around about 1904, maybe 1905. These are really interesting vehicles. They were made at the Molsham Works in Chelmsford, and they used paraffin, not coal, as a fuel. Um, we know the company ran routes between Lexlade, Fairford, and Cirencester from around 1904 and 1905 to about World War One before they sort of vanished. The buses they were single decked, but they had roof seats, as you can see here. Typically 14 seats, 12 inside, and two with the driver. And they were being marketed as being entirely free from smell, noise, and vibration. But thinking it's being run on paraffin, that's going to smell. And I can't believe those things were very vibration free or not very noisy. They must have been quite rattly old things, I think. So this is, I think we've seen this one before. This is the GWR bus number 16, and it's a 20 horsepower Milnesdale Daimler standard double deck 018 16 RO bus. Took me a lot of research to find out exactly what type it was. Seen here at the Grove at Chalford in 1905, and of course the GWR ran feeder services into their stations. Although interestingly, this bus was going from Stroud Station to Brimscombe, Chalford. So they had their own halts by this date, so I'm not quite sure why they kept this service up, but they did. This one here is the National Omnibus and Transport Company Limited Charabang with passengers in London Road, Stroud. The charabangs different from buses in that they had benched seats arranged in rows, with each row having a door on either side, although some only had the door on one side, I've been told. And they were commonly used for large parties and excursions. And even today, we'll often use the phrase, we're going out on a charabang ride when we mean a coach ride. And there is actually a difference between a bus and a coach, which is for another talk. I love this picture. It's a double-decker bus, LHY 936, turning left into Treadworth Road from Treadworth High Street, and it's Treadworth Junior School behind it. And this is the number 3 service running St Barnabas Church via Finley Road. I don't know if there's still a bus on that route. I suspect not. I suspect it'd be quite difficult to get a big bus down through Treadworth High Street at the moment, just for the amount of traffic there is there. Isn't it carnivals? So I love this picture. It's from the Cheltenham Chronicle and Gloucestershire Graphic. It's a carnival in Stroud 1912. And if you have a look at it, I do think the classic phrase, not unusual for Stroud, sums it up, basically. Look at this in detail. There are some really funny people here. The most obvious one is the man in the bottom, the Michelin man. He's got a name. He's actually called Bibendum, and he originates from a Latin quotation by the Roman poet Horace in the phrase "Nunc est bibendum," which translates as "Now is the time to drink," and that was used as an advertising slogan by the tire maker Michelin. To your health, the Michelin tire drinks obstacles. That's where he comes from. Isn't that great? Cars, lots of pictures of cars here in the archive. So this is the one from June 1910 when the Bristol and Gloucestershire Automobile Club gave the delicate and crippled children of Cheltenham an outing, stopping off at the George Hotel at Birdlip. And the George is on the left-hand side of this picture. You do wonder how long it took some of these cars to either get up Birdlip Hill or come up through Leghampton. Must have been quite a while, I think. This is a nice picture. This is a 1921 Arrol Johnson 2.4 litre saloon tourer. The firm were Scottish car makers from 1896 to 1931. They're credited with making the first automobile in Britain, although they didn't survive for that much longer. This was advertised as an all-weather car, and it was effectively a light saloon when you put the soft top up and a touring car with a soft top down. I love the old distinctions of these cars between it's a tourer or a saloon. Nowadays we don't have that. We lost it sort of in the 70s and 80s, I guess. But this is shown outside the Fielding and Platt Works in Gloucester, and we think the man is either John or Jack Fielding. The photo doesn't discriminate for sure, sadly, but it's a rather nice picture, a rather nice vehicle. I put in C for countryside. I love this picture. It's a common sight in the Cotswolds since Roman times. It's a flock of sheep being driven along the avenue in Bisley. You know, it looks very, very idyllic. The sheep all seem to be well behaved and walking along the road as opposed to going in all sorts of directions. But like herding sheep's like herding cats. It's hard work. But also, you know, one of the reasons you need to herd sheep, if you have stock animals, you need fences to keep them where they're supposed to be. And prior to the 1960s, hedging and the introduction of mechanical chain flailing, which is awful, hedging was always undertaken by hand with bullocks, slashes, and axes used. And this is a photo. We think it might have been a competition, but we're not sure. Although, to be honest, the hedge they're laying behind it doesn't look that good a hedge, to be honest, compared to the modern ones. But the idea of laying a hedge is it created a stock-proof barrier, and it was a skilled job, and you had lots of people that was their career, their whole lives. It was all but abandoned by the 1970s, and you got these blinking hedge flails coming in, the vandals of the hedges, we call them. They are dreadful. They rip up the hedges, they break the branches, they don't create very good fences, so therefore, you know, you have to have a fence behind the hedge because they just grow from the top and not from the bottom. But thankfully, hedge laying is sort of making a comeback now, but it's quite expensive because it's quite time consuming. But say you can often see a laid hedge is a thing of beauty, so it's well worth looking out for them. So Gloucester used to have several large agricultural shows. The Morton Show, which was our fantastic show if you'd ever been. The Stroud Show, which has made a comeback now, which is nice to see. And the largest was the Three Counties. But you had all these shows going on. And this is just a couple of pictures that we've got here. There's a goat, some rams, and a prize Hereford bull. The bull's actually being shown. We're not sure where that is. I've got a suspicion that it's actually at Morton, but I'm not sure. And for months beforehand, farmers would be busy fussing over and picking the animals they wanted to show, smartening up. You know, my uncle used to go over as one of his bulls with a tooth comb, basically, to try and keep its fur level. It's great fun. And the rival, they all want to win a rosette, basically, because why? Because that's going to increase the value of the animal. So there is a good reason for these shows, and they're not just fun, although they are great fun. Dancing, obviously, Saturday night dance is popular from the 1920s onwards, and this comes from the Citizen. It's just a 1963 couple. I found it, and I just loved it. You know, it's a real good capture of action there. We've got a few others but they're hard work to find actually, because you put dance into our catalogue, and it don't come up with many photographs, to be honest. But I do like this one, and you know, wonder what these folks are doing now. You know, so it's 60 odd years ago. They're probably still going. I wonder if they can still dance. Docks. So Gloucester is the maritime heart of the county, an England seagoing port. We've got lots of photographs of the docks. Obviously, these are just two images to give a flavour of the activity that was going on there, and the usual onlookers, kids from school, basically, they're wandering around the docks. And, you know, today we're lucky if we get the tall ships in to get two or three, but back then, look at the sails and masts there, isn't it wonderful? It must have been a great thing to see. So Gloucester was obviously the main port, but it wasn't the only one. Sharpness, Lydney, Bullowpill, Tewkesbury were all active ports at one time or another. And I've just picked this one shot from Sharpness from J. Brinkworth's collection here. And it just goes to show this is Sharpness main basin. Look at the number of different types of ships there. We've got a couple of 7 trows into the front, rowing boat, another trow there. There's just a couple of steamers behind, you know. So you again, this is, you know, Sharpness we know still gets reasonable amount of trade, but nothing like it used to. So though shipping declined rapidly, especially post-war period, traffic on the Gloucester Sharpness Canal remained a regular sight, especially from these things. These are the tankers of John Harker Limited, and they were carrying fuel up the Severn from 1929 until 1975, possibly even a bit later. And this is a lovely portrait of the tanker barge Winnie H coming alongside Monk Meadow Dock in Gloucester. Of course, Monk Meadow is where there is an oil tank farm there. We know she was built 1935 at Harker's Yard at Nottingham in West Yorkshire. She was built as a dumb barge, but was later converted into a powered craft in 1950. Oddly, I couldn't find out what her fate was. It's not listed anywhere, so I'm not quite sure what happened to her. Presumably, she was broken up somewhere in the 1980s, or may have been reconverted back to a dumb barge somewhere. We just don't know. Donkeys, popular beast of burden, especially around the hilly areas around Stroud. Might have seen this one before. This is the Charles Gardner with Jenny the donkey at Tankard Spring at Chalford on his bred round. So around Chalford especially, donkeys were used quite late into the 1950s. And I think there's actually a new donkey service starting around Chalford. I've got a feeling there is. But, they were well suited for this sort of, fairly gentle work, I think. And this picture, I like it. It's a citizen taking a photograph of a new donkey foal, which you can see on the left there. And it's a bundle of fluff, doesn't it? And there's mum being fed. I couldn't find out anything else about this photo, sadly. Now, donkeys, we know they were frequently used for local transport, especially where a horse was considered excessive. We might have seen this before. This is a great photo of Nurse Wolfe in Aggs Lane, Gotherington, about the start of daily rounds in 1895. So it's really nice early picture. This one is a donkey cart with child passengers outside Thornbury Castle in August 1881. So it's again, it's a really nice photo. You can sort of tell it's Thornbury by the start of those pillars. That castle has that there. But again, nice little donkey and trap ride, great fun. This one is a really unusual one. It's a glass slide, comes from an uncatalogued mystery collection that the archives inherited from the City Library, and it's obviously a circus, I think, coming or a travelling display coming to town, and it's obviously the parade. And we know that circuses, when they come to town, very often they used to have a parade through the town to advertise their presence. This has got a hint of Cheltenham about it, but you can't really be sure, so it's just a guess, really. It might well be somewhere else. And if anybody, it might not even be in Gloucestershire, but if anybody does recognise it, please, let us know. We'd love to find out a bit more about it. Fire Brigade. So I love this photo. This is Minchtampton Fire Brigade with their horse-drawn, steam-powered fire engine. This might actually be a tender to the engine because I can't see the actual boiler on it there, but it's a lovely photograph. Minchtampton had a fire brigade as before 1800, so they were quite a forward-thinking little borough at the time. This is one of Stroud Urban District Council's fire engines fighting a fire at Workman's Timber Mills. A really nice photo of it in action. Interestingly, these appliances only had water for the engine's boiler. They couldn't pump any, they didn't carry any water other than that. So if they needed water, they actually find an alternate water source, such as a hydrant, if they were there, a pond or a stream. And this one is taking water from the stream there, and you can see that big hose going down into it. At a pinch, they could actually fire the boiler up with this pond water, but they had to put a different hose in. It went through a system of filters, and I was talking to a chap at the London Steam Museum about these, and he sent me some information on it. Hence, how I was able to write that bit. Stroud had two appliances. This is a training session. Matthews Grist's Merritt's Mill in Inchbrook, and again, if you look by the big wheel of the engine on the left hand side, you can see a hose that's been popped down into the water. Presumably they must have had some sort of box filter on the end of it to try and keep out debris, and that must have been one of the difficult things about it, how often it would block up, I think. This particular mill, made wool fibres, feathers and downs for Henry Grist and Company's mattress and pillow factory at Crystal Fountain Mill. And both these mills are still in existence, although they're not anymore mills. I love this photo. I'm sure you've seen it before. It's one of Stroud UDC's, and we know this. It's a Merriweather and Sons horse-drawn double vertical boiler fire appliance. Very common appearance, and it's probably one of those you've seen in there as the previous two photos. Reason we like it so much, this is a postcard sent to a girl, sent by a girl to a sister. And if you look closely at the chap on the left-hand side, you'll see a little X there. And on the reverse of the photograph, this says, "I have put a cross by the one I am going to meet tonight." So it's lovely. It's obviously a girl sort of sending her sister a picture of what she might hope to be a future boyfriend. It's a lovely photo. Look at fishing. So the most common form of fishing in the county with a fixed engine fish weirs or basket weirs found on the Severn estuary from Ore downwards. They were funnel-like structures that faced upstream and could catch salmon down to shrimps depending on how tight the weave was at the end. Each rank was licensed by the county sessions, and we have a few photographs of them. We know they were emptied at low water and the baskets were removed over winter. And if you travel on the train down to Lydney or down to Chepstow, though, you can still see a few remains of the uprights in the river, although there are no longer any fishing weirs, sadly. From Lydney downwards into the estuary, so lathe netting was practiced. And this is a fisherman fishing with a lathe net. Basically, had two arms called the rhymes. You could basically run after salmon in shallow water, or you could find a rock and wedge it like this chap's doing here. And the idea is the fish just go into the net. Interestingly, the rock that the man is standing on there is said to be a parish boundary stone. So that's I've not come across too many of those in the river. That's an interesting a whole interesting set of history to learn about, I think. Above all, where the river is a little bit deeper and you didn't get the mix between the tides, you tended to get seine net fishing. So they would go out in a little punt with the net anchored at one end, go out across the river and then wind it back, bring it back in to see what they caught. Mostly these people are fishing for salmon, although sort of shad and also eels and occasionally flounder were also caught in the Severn. So they were also all there in reasonable quantities. Fun fairs, noisy, brash and bright. You love them or hate them. This is a photograph of Rogers Fair on Winchhampton Common in 1925. The traction engines are there not only for towing the rides, but they were showman's engines. They all had dynamos on the front to generate electricity, which powered the rides. I can't remember what the double swing's called that you can see there on the left, but certainly looks quite active. So this is the picture of Gloucester's Fun Fair at night, the 1961 fair. Again, totally different. The older fairs were tended to close when it went dark, although some kept going. But when you need a fair, you need food, and this lovely picture of a mobile fish and chip van here. This is somewhere in the Cirencester area, 1920s. It was horse-drawn, and basically the horse has been tied off here somewhere else, and they've got a big oil boiler. You see the smoke coming out of the chimney there. So again, really nice, a tradition that hasn't changed. 1978, Green Cross man Dave Prowse visited Wadden Junior School. Isn't this a great photo? The Green Cross Code was a safety campaign, ran from 71 to 1990, following on from the Tufty Club. I don't know how many of us remember the Tufty Club. I was a member, had my little Tufty badge. It was great. But Dave Prowse, bless him, he was already portrayed Darth Vader in Star Wars by this time, so getting him to play the Green Cross man was a real coup. And everybody loved him. But interestingly, his lines were voiced over in the films by James Earl Jones, basically because Dave's West Country accent was very, very strong. And on set, they always nicknamed him Darth Farmer, which I think is great. But he was happy to do this sort of thing, and he did a lot for road safety. And I'm sure you remember some of the actual TV adverts that came across. And he's obviously lifted up this road crossing lady, lollipop lady, without any effort whatsoever. Haymaking. Haymaking on a farm, vital job, created fodder for feeding animals in the wintertime. Prior to the induction of mechanical mowers, scythes were used to cut grass. This fantastic photograph in a field at Bisley from the 1920s shows. Scythes are actually quite efficient. They're quite easy to use, and they're not too tiring if you get the technique right. Horse-drawn mowers made the task faster, but the windrows, which is the lines of cut hay, still needed human management. You notice in this picture on the right-hand side, the chap with a lovely hay rake, which are still used in some places today. This is the cutting hay at Copsgrove Farm in Bisley. The one thing I puzzle about here is that the chap behind the man with the rake appears to be holding some sort of frame, and I'm not sure what that is. I've tried to do a bit of research, and I'm just not sure whether it's something to do with measuring the actual width of the windrows, maybe, or something connected with the cut mowers. I'm not sure. Once hay was cut, it had to be turned tedding to dry it. And this is a horse-drawn tedder made by the Upthorne Ironworks of Cam. And the chap next to it is Percy Lacey, who's the son of the owner, Felix Lacey. And they made quite a lot of farm machinery locally, although I don't think anything now survives, sadly. By World War One, mechanical balers had been introduced, and this is a Rushton mechanical baler on the left-hand side here, being driven by a traction engine at Bisley again in 1917. The hay would be put to make a rick, and then the actual thatching on top of the rick would be used to keep the hay dry. With so many horses on the Western Front, haymaking was of national importance for the war effort. A quarter of all cross-channel shipping in World War One carried hay for horses, and that's a vast amount. And it was so important that to help with the hay harvest, the War Office has actually released soldiers from service to specifically help get the hay crop in. And this is here, you see the pictures, row of soldiers at the front of here, and they're in the back working. So it was of vital importance, this hay. We don't think about this today, but it was crucial. Another crucial time is harvest time. Um, and for that, what do you need? Well, this photograph shows you need good dry weather and lots of hands. And this is a lovely photograph. It shows sticks of corn being loaded onto a wagon before being threshed. This looks like quite an early photograph. It's not dated, unfortunately, but judging by the guy in the top hat there, this threshing could have been done by hand or possibly by an early threshing machine at this time. But it's a scene that hasn't changed in the country, hadn't changed in the countryside for many hundreds of years. However, all things give way, and these lovely images show the threshing machine of W.S. Browning and Sons of Stonehouse in operation. Powered by steam, these machines revolutionised the harvest. So you put sticks of corn fed into the thresher. This separated the grain from the stalks and the husks, letting the grain fall out to be bagged on the side there. You can see it on the top right, while their straw was taken on top of the machine where it could be put onto a rick. And these machines heralded the start of the agricultural contracting business, but also heralded the start of the swing riots. Because they displaced so many agricultural workers, these people started rioting about it. So lots of these machines were targeted by the swing rioters and broken up. And Wiltshire and Gloucestershire were notorious counties for the riots. However, by the late 1950s, modern farmers were harvesting using combine harvesters. Essentially, these are self-propelled threshing machines. And here are drain tanks being emptied into a trailer towed alongside a rather nice Massey Ferguson combine. You can know the colour, it's going to be red. My uncle had one just the same. I used to love harvest time at my uncle's farm. When he was combining like this, he would actually stand up in the combine seat, shouting and hollering to make sure all the animals that had hidden in the corn would just run away and get out of the way of the combine. Great time, great days. Horses, lifeblood of transport, went into the 1920s, really. I know when my dad left school, my granddad wanted to buy him a horse. He said, "No, you don't want to buy a car, then they're never going to last." So my dad went for the car. But this lovely photo shows a lady in an apron and a bonnet with a pony outside the Royal Oak in Winchcombe. Sadly, we don't know anything else about this photo. Presumably, she's a landlady of the pub or connected to the pub, but we just don't know. This lovely photo shows wounded, recuperating soldiers. We know that assigned to work to farm work at Manor Farm in Quedgeley. They're working with the horses. Of course, most people did work with horses back then, especially agricultural labourers, and even in the towns, the draymen would be working with horses. So people were so much more familiar with horses. Interestingly, it might be hard to see in this picture, but if you zoom in, the actual horses here all have mainsprigs, flights, and tail braid decorations, which suggests that they've been tarted up for a special occasion. And we think this is actually for one of the first armistice celebrations that were done. They did a parade through Quedgeley, and we think this is what these horses were being decorated for. This is another nice photograph of a Shire stallion taken at Stud Farm, Blaisdon. It was once known as Newhouse Farm, but it became more specialised in horses. And we got a note on the envelope accompanying this photograph states it shows Peter Stubbs of Blaisdon with Stallion of Stud Farm. Presumably, Peter Stubbs is the gentleman in the foreground and not the groom holding the horse behind. Horses, big horses start somewhere. This image comes from the David Evans photographic collection, taken somewhere in the Slimbridge area, and shows it's a great photo of a young Shire horse being fed, hand-fed. And isn't that lovely? You know, this is when horses are nice. When they get too big at the other end, they get a bit scary. Well, I think they do. Domesday Book records over 6,000 mills in England, and it's likely that there are many more that weren't recorded. Most villages had a watermill, especially there was a watercourse in the vicinity with a good fall of level where there wasn't, you tended to get windmills. Um, But these are front and back views of the same mill, Ablington Mill in the River Colne. The first top picture is looking, if you see the map here, it's looking from the footbridge by the words SL, looking downstream. The other photo is in front of it, and you say this thanks to Curtis Coronium Museum for this one. It's one of theirs. We have a copy of it here. But again, every village had this sort of milling activity which was going on. Larger villages often had larger mills. Bybury and Lower Slaughter are typical, and these often had quite large mill ponds and quite complex water management systems. So Bybury Mill, the top here, this had a reservoir actually in Ablington, about 3/4 of a mile away, and the water was fed to it via a long leat. That long leat now helps Bybury Trout Farm, so it goes into there. Lower Slaughter, which is the mill here, again, it's a lovely mill. It's open. You can still visit it today. There's a lovely tea room at the back. That's got a mill pond, which is 1.3 acres in size, so it's huge. Bybury Mill, sadly, it used to be a wonderful country museum. It was brilliant. Sadly, it's long gone now, and all the items inside it have been dispersed. Interestingly, you look at the chimneys there. So many mills actually installed steam engines, hence the chimneys, for several reasons. Firstly, they were used as auxiliary power sources to help mill corn in times of low water, but they could also be used to pump water into a mill pond or a leat to enable a water wheel to function. And also, they actually tended to help actually drive the mill machinery themselves to grind corn faster to try and compete with steam-powered mills, which were popping up away from water sources and everything. So they were a response to the more modern demands of the milling world, essentially. Towns also had mills. They could be much larger. Abbey Mill at Tewkesbury is a good example. We know this mill was built around 1100 by the monks, located on the Mill Avon, which is a man-made channel from the River Avon that ran to the mill above where it met the Severn. But much of its history in the mill was property of Tewkesbury Abbey, but it passed into private hands after dissolution. 1793, enlarged and rebuilt with 4 water wheels running, and it remained in operation until 1920, only closing due to competition from the more larger and more modern Healings flour mill just north to this. That only closed in 2006. And again, Tewkesbury Historical Society have some great work on these Tewkesbury mills. Lots of detail in this view of Workman's Brothers Mill Draycott in Dursley that we don't know what the occasion is. It's a wonderful one, as well as the sacks of flour you can see, and the horse-drawn wagons there. There are 2 overtype steam wagons. These are popular in the early 1900s. And if you look on the bottom right-hand side, you can see there's a couple of railway tracks there, railway lines. This was a siding that was used to bring wheat and corn into the mill and take out milled flour. It branched off the Dursley and Midland Junction Railway. That opened in 1856, and though the siding closed in 1959, the line actually remained open until 1970. Love this picture. This is Ebley Mill in the Strandwater Canal, taken around 1910. We know there'd been a mill at Ebley since 1400s. It was probably a water mill then, for grinding corn, but after 1800 it was acquired by the Clissold family, and it's relocated to the south side of the canal and became a textile mill, in which case it was using the water to drive the mill machinery. The building, well, most of it survives as the headquarters of Stroud District Council today, so it's nice to see a building that's got some good history. Carrying on being used. Sadly, Gloucester City Council have the lovely Philpot warehouses down at the docks. They've moved out of those now, which is a shame. These 2 views show carpet looms inside the mill of Champion Hall carpet manufacturers in Dursley, and you can just imagine the noise of these plants when they are working. The woolen trade was obviously the principal industry in Stroud because of initially because of the availability of water power to drive mill machinery, although of course later steam power took over, and then later after that even electrical driven mills took over. Gloucestershire was famous for its superfine broadcloth mostly, most of which actually went overseas. Champion and Hall, we know a little bit about their history. They're originally a saddlery business, but expanded into rope making before then moving into cloth and carpet production. So quite a few links in the stage there, from sort of saddlery through to carpets. Market days. As a rural county, markets were common. This is typical. Chipping Camden Sheep Market, taken around 1910. And even like most animal markets, even today, it's just basically organised chaos, it always seems like. But people seem to know what they do. But this is a lovely photograph. But nothing suggests organised chaos like Gloucester's Barton Fair here. You can see how busy it was, animals everywhere, a great time of celebration for the city. And it still is, basically, though we don't get the animals. Mind you, if you think the previous image looks chaotic, how about these? These are cattle being driven into Gloucester's cattle market in what is now King Square by the old bus station and the new bus station, the 1930s. We're not quite sure where the top image was taken. I'm not been able to match it up, but the bottom one shows cattle coming onto Market Parade. Although I'm not quite sure which way they're coming in there. I've not quite been able to match up the buildings with the plan of the maps there. But you can imagine sort of like a market days, Gloucester must have been absolutely chaotic. You know, herds of cattle coming through, sheep as well. It must have been really good fun. Although, if you had to get anywhere quickly, annoying. Forest Dean's Mines Act of 1838. I'm sure we all heard about it. All male persons born or hereafter to be born and abiding within the said 100 of St. Bravils, the age of 21 years and upwards, who should have worked a year and a day in a coal or iron mine within the 100 of St. Basil's shall be deemed to be free miners. This is a couple of views of miners registering their gale. They had to sort of specify where they could dig and what mineral they could extract. And the forest mines, the drift mines especially, were notoriously cramped. Difficult to stand up in most of them, mostly where you worked. And they were also notorious for having sort of young children actually pulling the hods out in the very early days. But as well as drift mines, deep mines are opened in Dean. This is Canop Colliery, fantastic photograph, 1932. It's now the site of the Forest Dean Cycle Centre, and it was Forest Dean's largest mine in doing. And you can just see, look at the sort of the coal wagons here, the railway wagons that were fed onto it. Wonderful photo. The mine itself opened in 1912, so quite late, really. By 1930, it employed 1,000 men and extracted 1,000 tons of coal a day. But the drawback was it was also pumping out 3 million gallons of water a day. So it was a very, very wet mine. When coal was nationalised in 1947, British Coal took over all the deep mine collieries in the forest, but it left the small free mines. And a rather amusing story in the miners' strike of 1981 that a bunch of miners came from South Wales came to picket one of the free mines, and they turned up at the free mines. It's outside Rusbridge somewhere, and basically they couldn't find anybody. It was all closed, and they spoke to somebody. Said, "Oh no, they don't work on this day. They've gone home." So it was quite funny. This mine closed in 1960. The cost of pumping water was a major factor here. They could find other collieries that were drier. And the last deep mine in the forest, Northern United Colliery, closed 5 years later, Christmas Day in 1965, bringing an end really to a massive industry for the forest. Though more famous for aviation concerns, Doughty also made mining equipment. That's why I've thrown this photo in here. This is a view of Isle Court, Doughty's seat, and one of the Doughty manufacturing sites behind it. Lovely photograph. It's taken looking westwards, and you note the lovely garden, which is still there, and now built over there's a landscape park which has been built over there, the houses on it. If you look at this today, the background's going to be full of B&Q, Asda, the new Isle Transport Hub, and the A40 Golden Valley. They're all roughly in that direction. Motorbikes, they can be gentle and sedate, as demonstrated here by Mr. and Mrs. Morris Smith on their motor-right sidecar in 1914, or they can be fast, noisy, and smelly. There's a lovely picture of a Cotswold motorcycle scramble in June 1968. We think it's somewhere in Minchinhampton, but we're not sure. Nurseries, lots of plant nurseries around the county. I'm speaking from an old one here itself. Largest was John Jeffries of Son and Cirencester. We love this photograph. It's taken at Siddington and shows a large conifer tree being moved on a Barron's tree transporter. This transporter was built by a noted horticulturist, get my teeth in, called William Barronson, and it revolutionized the movement of mature trees. So it became very effective and very popular. Sadly, today there's just one machine surviving, but its future is good as it's maintained in working order at Kew Gardens, and it is still used to move mature trees, believe it or not. So founded in 1795, Jeffreys and Son had nurseries in Cirencester, Somerford Keynes, Siddington, and they traded until closing in 1980. They had new seed catalogues every year, and this is one of my favourites. 1939, their pride of place went to the Cotswold Pixie Sprout, which went alongside their Cotswold Queen cabbage and the Victory onion. Brilliant, aren't they? I don't know if any of these plant varieties still survive today. I suspect not. But if anybody does have a Cotswold Pixie grown in their garden, please look after it and start spreading the word so everybody else can have some, because it looks like it's a lovely little plant. Call this one oops. I could have also called it, you didn't want to do that. So this is a badge. This badge is a narrow escape, a motor Laudette. Remember I said about different types of cars? This is the Laudette. I would be able to figure out what it was in the end, but it belonged to Messrs. Bridges, son of Cirencester, and it lost control while returning to port on the water in May 1929 with 7 people on board. It apparently smashed through the fence, lost the wheel, or almost lost the wheel, and went down a steep bank. The bank doesn't know that steep. Luckily, it didn't roll over and nobody was hurt. But as you imagine, we've got quite a few pictures of accidents around the county. This is a typical one. This is an overturned tipper lorry on a building site on London Road in Stroud. This was obviously a case of started to tip it unlevel and the lorry just went over. I love this photo. This is 1985 Stuntorama Demolition Derby. I think it's Gloucester's Park. I'm not sure. It probably has something to do with our very own local daredevil stuntman Dick Shepherd. But what I like about it is look at this extensive crowd safety protection. There's just hay bales here. These cars at speed are going to go through those quite easily. So it's something that definitely wouldn't be allowed today. Pancake Day, Shrove Tuesday, 6th of March 1962. Very hotly contested pancake race from the Citizen. I love the terrified look of the boy on the right. Presumably these ladies have elbowed him out of the way and he's now in 4th place, looking a bit scared. Isn't it a great photo? Parrot, I love this. It's coming another Citizen one. It shows Lorro the parrot and his owner Peter Phoebe in September 1958. We think they were a sort of showbiz double act that performed tricks. But presumably the tricks are mostly done by the parrot. And you might think, what an interesting name Lorro is. But I had a look at this, and it's not really that interesting. Lorro is a general term for parrot across most Spanish-speaking countries. It also describes most species of parrot. So technically, this is Peter Phoebe with Parrot the parrot. Great, isn't it? Picnics, staple for our would we be in our British summer, that picnic, blankets, jam sandwiches, sand in the food, wasps. Picnics are very common, and again, like the some of the big firms that often have picnic days out, and this is just I couldn't resist putting this one in. This is from the old Bon Marsh, giving their workers a treat, a steamship ride down to basically Tewkesbury and back with games and dancing. Really great things. Pigs, we're obviously famous for our pigs in Gloucestershire. Where would we be without us cheeses, our old spot for pork chops? This is a great photograph. I love this photograph. It shows a woman herding pigs in High Street, Chipping Camden, beside the Live and Let Live Inn. Presumably they're going to market. I don't know, but you can imagine what chaos this would be today in Chipping Camden. I heard about 10 pigs running up and down, just one woman. Really interesting. Not sure the breed of these. There's a couple of dark pigs there, maybe an old spot, bottom right, we're not sure. This is how we really like our pigs, though. This is a hog roast at Bisley, stated 1912, celebrating the coronation of George V. So obviously somebody's donated a pig for a whole hog roast for the village to celebrate it, which is great. And these sort of things can still happen today. Slides in the past, obviously they were 1,000 feet high in the clouds, and on summer days that slide bed was red hot and you're liable to burn yourself on your way down. Um, Users of this slide at Woodchester are quite lucky though, because there's obviously grass surrounding this slide. Most programs I knew had concrete underneath, so if you fell off, you were done for basically. And I love this picture of a girl on a swing. How high can you go? Was anybody ever brave enough to go loop the loop? I'm sure we tried. I never got round one. I had a friend who did it once, and we thought he was just amazing. But I was never good enough to do it, sadly. Look at the police. Gloucestershire Constabulary is now the oldest constabulary in the country. It came into being at 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 15th October, 1839, about an hour before the Wiltshire force. We know many old police officers lived with their families at the country stations. This is a lovely shot of PC Stafford with his family standing in the doorway of the Withington police station in 1906. And that police station is still there, although today it's not a police station, obviously. We don't know much about this rather stern-looking officer, but I think having 6 kids probably has something to do with why he's looking so stern. But again, lovely photo. Police officers don't use outfits anymore. But this is again another nice photo when they did. Presumably they used the outfit to take other police officers to places. I'm not sure. This is a more interesting one from my point of view. Kitting up to the end of the water, the Gloucestershire Police Diving Unit. I've dived with these people back in the 1980s. It's a long story, but I know what they are putting on there are dry suits with neck apertures. To get these on, you had to actually pull it over through the neck hole. So you'd put your foot in the neck, get that in, then you put the foot in the neck again, and you pull it out, and they were the most uncomfortable things ever. I dived in one once, never again. I love this picture. It's straight out of Agatha Christie or Gosford Park. A couple of plainclothes CID officers outside the police station. Aren't they great? They're just what you imagine police officers in the 1920s to look like. Police dogs. Police dogs are really ferocious. They bite bits out of police cars. If you doubt me, just listen to the Wrath of Zeus episode on the wonderful BBC Radio 4's It's a Fair Cop, a wonderful programme. And Zeus is a lovely dog, mostly. This is Constable Deacon being trained by a police dog in 1959. This is how you fall over when a dog's got you. And I like this one. This is Prince, Gloucestershire Constabulary's first police dog. You can hear him thinking, can't you? Is he a bad man? Does he have soft fleshy bits? And it's great. Police dogs are great, and they are really well-behaved beasties. Punch and Judy, originally intended for shows for adults, but they morphed into children's entertainment in the late Victorian era. This is a lovely picture of a crowd of people and children being entertained in Strand in 1900. One reason for the change from adult to children's entertainment was because the shows originally had a cast of the devil, he was always in there, the hangman, and Punch had a mistress, Pretty Polly. And it was decided that these were quite inappropriate for youngsters, so they were dropped mostly from the tales. This is another one of our mystery slides. It comes from that glass plate collection I told you about. And it's a seaside location, a Punch and Judy show going on. There's a pier in the background, but again, we've got no other information. This could be in Britain or it could be in France. We just don't know. I've taken a guess because it could potentially be Western, but I don't know. I don't know much about the Western Pier, to be honest, when it was built. Quarrymen, quarries all over Gloucestershire looking for rock, gravels and minerals. Many were short, small concerns just used for extracting stone to build farm buildings or houses, after which they were abandoned and left the grass over. But some were bigger. And this is a lovely photograph of some quarry workers in the Minchinhampton quarry. And to give you an idea of how big these could be, because a few still exist today, this is one of Simmons' quarries on Minchinhampton Common. We think it could be Crane Quarry. It looks very big and deep. Certainly, if you came across it today, you think, wow, but you wouldn't, because today it's actually totally filled in. There's no sign of it whatsoever there today. But one of the interesting things I like about this photograph is if you look on the right-hand side, look at those very, very white blocks of stone. And when it was freshly extracted, some of the stones on the Minchinhampton quarry were bright white, and they only aged to yellow after time. And this is what made them so important and so vital for some of the local stone industries. And these stones were exported all over the place. Railways, sadly today our railways are a shadow of their former selves. This is a lovely little picture of the Gloucester Railway Carriage Company's shunter, Siam at the works. This is just a view of Cheltenham King Station, opened in 1881 on the Cheltenham and Banbury Direct Railway. Didn't close till 62. Thank you, Mr. Beechin. Today it's a little, how sad. And I love this photo. This is sat at Drybrook, a terminus of the Great Western Railway's Forest Dean branch, and you've got an auto train sitting there waiting to return to Newnham. Really nice photograph. And again, thanks to people like Lightmore Publishing, there are lots of photographs of the railways in Dean that you can dig out and find today. This is another one that I love. This photograph. It's unidentified Great Western Railway 440-3800 county class locomotive hauling a passenger express through Churchdown Station. You can almost feel the speed and the noise there. And if you have a look in the top right corner, there is somebody there. There's a signalman in his box letting the engine go through. Station Road in Cam, 1910. It might look like a dull photo, but I included it because it's got some rather nice detail. Firstly, if you look on the left-hand side on the pavement, there's a public water tap. There's one where sort of the bottom left-hand corner. Then if you look where the man is standing, there's one behind him as well. So this is public pipe water, which I think is quite nice view. We don't see many of these. Behind it, there's a level crossing of the station, and on the crossing, probably being shunted, is a coal wagon owned by Sidney Thomas, who is a coal merchant of Lower Cam. And we're pretty sure that that wagon you're looking at here is this one, which was purchased from the Gloucester Railway Carriage Company in 1905. He only had a few carriages, so it probably is the one. So I think that's why I'd like to include this one. It's a really nice one. Looking at schools, we have lots and lots of photographs from schools, posed classes. This is Keynes Cross in 1895 and Amney Crucis in 1914. Lots of those. However, we have really fewer action shots like this one. This is taken from St Michael's Church of England Primary School in Winterbourne in 47. And I love that photo. They get out after the rain, given hoops to skip round on. This is an interesting one. This is a quite leading nonchalant at a 5-bar gate. They look like they're looking for trouble. This is some girls of St George's Diocesan Training School on an outing. The school had its origins as a mission to rescue wayward girls in London, but by 1933 was open to other girls who wanted to live a better life. It trained girls for service, laundry work, which also supplemented the home's finances, needlework and other handicrafts. You won't find any engineers being coming out of there, but today it's still going as a charity home, a very good charity home for women with learning difficulties. But I love this photograph. It's wonderful. We obviously cannot miss showing this one. This is the class of 73 outside Kingsholm School. This was the last class that used the school. And of course, today the school is now the Gloucestershire Heritage Hub. And, you've got to look at some of the faces on these guys. Don't they look wonderful? I love the two guys on the in the standing row on the far right. Look at them. They look great. It's a wonderful photo. And we all know Kingsholm School was really loved. People loved it. And it's had a good spot in the community. Cricket Scouts and Cubs. Scouts and Cubs are never happy unless they're burning something or playing with fire in some form. Here's the cub here and some scouts cooking over a long fire on a table. Think it's around about 1960. I was looking at some of the uniform things to try and figure out why, and I couldn't actually pin a good date down on it. We're not sure what the event is, but when you zoom in on the bottom right, you can see they're selling hot dogs for 8p. That's 70p today. You wouldn't get a hot dog today, but it might well be cooked and you wouldn't die of food poisoning. Steinwriting. It's another lovely picture. Remember the picture earlier on of Rogers Fair at Minchinhampton? Well, this is two of Rogers Showman engines, and they've been painted by the firm of Morton and Son of Iron Acton. And, don't they look resplendent in those things? They would be lovely and gleaming. The brass would be shining red paint. You can just imagine it. It must be wonderful to see those. But shooting, very popular country on the pastime estates. Most shooting was game or rough shooting, but clay pigeon shooting was fast becoming popular by the 1900s. This shows a rather large 14-gun shooting party at Sapperton. What I find interesting about this is you look at the two ladies on the right-hand side. The innermost one has a gun. Usually, ladies were given .410 shotguns to use, but she's holding what's obviously a 12 bore, so that's quite an interesting picture. This is taken at Foxtrot Ilmington. It's probably a more typical shooting party. 3 guns, 2 beaters, and probably gamekeepers, and a groom for the course. And they've got the transport. And again, like it or loathe it, this is rather nice image. Shops, lots of different shops in towns. Obviously, I'm going to run late now, aren't I? Picture of Winchcombe. Look at the butcher's carcasses brilliantly. This is the view of Gabb's Butchers in Minchinhampton. Notice everything's gone inside, but you can still smell the sawdust. Local co-op I've had here. Brilliant, lots of things. Interestingly, they also used overtype lorries. This is one. I do like their slogans: "Unity is strength, each for all and all for each." So again, some wonderful photos here. Grocers and bakers, good combination. This is bought on the water Wilkins, but below it I've got stationers in Stroud and newsagents. And again, opposite side of the street, you get a good combination, a hairdresser and an umbrella maker, which is the combination you don't see today. The Bon Marsh, now long gone, and everything, but pet shops are also becoming hard to find. This is one at Treadworth Road in Gloucester. And then I love this photograph, J. Bagley and Sons, College Grocery Stores Delivery Wagon. The shop's still going today. It's a chippy, St. Paul's Fish Bar. It does quite nice fish and chips, I have to say. I have used it. Village shops, most village shops had a little shop. This is the one at Sapperton. You very rarely could tell them apart from one of the houses. This one has got an advertisement for Biotis Coca, which I've not been able to find anything about at all. Quick few more sports days. They tend to survive just at schools now, but in the past, many local firms would put sport days on basically to foster a sense of camaraderie. And you'd have the serious events, but you'd have egg and spoon, 3-legged races, sack racing, etc., etc. Steeplejacking, used to repairs, all level high work. This is St Kelm's Church at Sapperton being repaired. This is probably one of my favourite ones. St John's Church in Gloucester, having the top of the spire being removed in 1910. It was carried out by Larkins and Sons Steeplejacks, and they had a banner there, not that anybody could read it. This firm is still going, actually, and I sent them a picture of this image, and they didn't have it in their collection, so they were real pleased to get it. Submarines, H-33 and H-49 came to Gloucester before the war. H-39 survived the war, but H-49 was sunk. In October 1957, HMS Shrimp, a Stickleback class midget sub, came to Gloucester, made some demonstration dives in the docks, ended up in Worcester before going back. Again, we've got some nice photos of those in the newspapers. Tea rooms, all the rage used to be, but coffee shops have taken over. These are tea rooms, some of the places. The only one we know the name of is the Grisha, which is the one on Cleve Hill. But again, very nicely, I'm sure. I like this one. This is Betty's, not quite Betty's Tea Rooms York. It's a peer refreshment rooms at Sharpness. Not quite the most salubrious joint, I'm sure, but everybody must have really enjoyed the tea they did. Quick few shots of towns here: Cinderford, Painswick, Berkeley, and Shipping Camden. Always look very quiet, the latter two. Stroud, Nailsworth, Stonehouse, and Newark, much busier, like there they are. Trams, Gloucester had trams from 1879 to 1904, but in 1904, the Gloucester Borough bought them out and made it electric, run by the Gloucester Corporation Tramways, and its peak track extended out to Brockworth. And again, there are lots of these photos of the slides around. Fewer ones of Cheltenham. This is a lovely view of the Cheltenham and Lake District Railway tram at Holy Apostles Church in Charlton Kings, the church that caught fire after lightning hit it. I remember that, seeing it. Again, a lovely view. We're not sure this might have been an open day for the tram. Quick look at a couple of villages. Again, very, very quiet even today. These villages are quiet. Few weddings. I do like this one. This is from the Graphic. Veer Chaplain Margaret Fenwick's wedding. They were married at Lower Swell, but the reception was in London. So a special train was laid on to take guests to the capital. You can't imagine that happening today, can you? And if you did, it cost an arm and a leg. This is Dorothy Arbuthnot in her wedding dress, and everything. Lovely photograph and lovely dress. One aspect we get of the period 1914 to 18 and the weddings of soldiers. This comes from June 1916, and we know sadly that many of these grooms never came home to their brides, which is very, very sad. Windmill pump at Price Walker and Co in Gloucester, presumably something to do with firefighting, but we're not sure, and we're not sure where they got the water from, whether they pumped it in from the canal and dumped it in that tank, or whether it basically came from a borehole there. I'm trying to find out a little bit more information on that, but I can't. Jen, this is a photograph of the Spetchley branch of the Berkeley family, and when we take people on tours of the archives here, this is the picture hanging up, and a copy of it hanging up in our link corridor, and we all stop by and pose the question: if this was an Agatha Christie tale, who is the villain? Okay, there's lots of nice things in it. The two ladies at the front obviously don't like each other, but who's the villain? Well, it's this guy here. Look at him. Doesn't he look an evil piece of work? You can see he's planning to knock the whole lot off in various forms. What can you say about this photo? A policeman with a policeman riding pillion with an Alsatian riding pillion on there. Don't ask about how many laws are being broken. And coming up really to the ends, recent use of the archives. This is how our search room used to look. Totally unrecognisable, but you can just about see a young Mr. Paul Evans in his office, which we used to name the Goldfish Bowl. There's another one there now. And that brings us to the end. Sorry for taking so long. This is a bit of an overrun on this one. But our next Heritage Hub event is Remember When, Afternoon Reminiscence, coming up this Saturday. Lots of things on there. And our next Secrets Revealed talk is on 26th of March. Get Off My Land, looking at the history of agriculture in the archives. And on that note, Gemma, I'll again back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, John. That was absolutely fantastic. And I know I'll be pinching some of those photographs that you've put out. Really, really wonderful. We've just got a couple of comments that have come in during the talk. First of all, Derek Hall would like to say that the elephant picture that you showed earlier looks very much like the Bristol Zoo, where the elephant called Rosie gave rides like that, where the passenger seat frame was lowered by ropes from a Lebanon cedar tree that looks like the trees behind the elephant. And Derek mentions that his brother, sister had a ride on Rosie in about 1947, and they also had a cart that was pulled by a llama, which sounds fantastic. And Derek actually has a photograph of that, so that's brilliant. Thank you very much,
brilliant.
Derek.
Thank you, Derek. That's great. I hadn't even thought of Bristol. What an idiot! Of course, got the Clifton Zoo, and that looks like the Clifton Downs, doesn't it? So yeah, brilliant.
Brilliant. That's how well. There we go. Another puzzle solved. Dot would like to mention that on the subject of police dogs, her in-law's dog was a failed police dog, as he would only bite people if they had a blanket or coat over their arm. And it was very good at jumping over high walls, but slept through 2 burglaries. So, oh dear. Sounds like a character. And I think Bryony, who does the tech things from her side, has just mentioned the fact that the link to the playlist today's session will be here is the link to the playlist today's session will be uploaded to, and this link will also be sent to you if you want to review this talk again. And there's also the link to future talks.
I should say that there's also the but we've got the exhibition of this online exhibition will be on as well. Not quite as many photographs as we've seen today because space precludes us, but they're still there to look at again.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. And just a couple of really nice comments at the end, just to say, Tony says, brilliant, very interesting. Thank you. A lot of work to prepare. Florence would like to say, well, wonderful collection, fascinating talk. More, please. I agree.
Thank you, Florence.
Yeah, I'd love to see a follow-up to this. Steve would like to say many thanks, most interesting. And Tony said another wonderful talk, easily enough material for 2, definitely. So really absolutely fantastic stuff there, so thank you.
It's one of the problems is we keep finding rich veins of material. Literally about 10 minutes before we broadcast this, I was up in the strong room looking for a photograph, and I found a load, and it's an album, and I've taken about 20 photographs in this album, so we could go on forever. So I don't want to, but we could do.
It's a nice problem to have, isn't it? It really is. It really is. Well, there we go. We'll have part 2 at some point. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming along to today's talk. And as always, I would like to thank John especially for this really fantastic visual talk. Just wonderful. So we hope to see you at the next one. And thank you very much. Bye-bye. Okay.